we are going to present on the topic characteristics of Indian English, and these are all the topics which we are going to cover in our presentation. At first, introduction to Indian English. Indian English is a variety of language that has developed in India as a result of the country's colonial history and the influence of local languages and culture. So, it is spoken by millions of people in India, and it has developed its own unique characteristics, including pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and idioms. It is also used in a variety of contexts, including education, business, media, and government as well. So, Indian English is a unique variety of English language spoken in India. It has developed its own distinct characteristics over time due to the influence of local languages, culture, and history. So, some of the key characteristics of Indian English include pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, idioms and expression, intonation, and rhythm. So, first, pronunciation. Indian English has a distinct pronunciations compared to British or American English. For example, the R sound is often pronounced with more emphasis, and there is a tendency to elongate vowel sounds. Next is vocabulary. Indian English incorporates a lot of words and phrases from local languages such as Hindi, Tamil, and Bengali. Some of these words may have different meanings or connotation in Indian English than they do in other varieties of English. And the next is grammar. So, Indian English often follows its own grammatical rules and structure. For example, there is a tendency to use the present continuous tense instead of the simple present tense. And the use of articles can differ from British or American English. And next, idioms and expression. Indian English has its own unique idioms and expression which may not be understood by speakers of the other varieties of English. For example, prepone is a word commonly used in Indian English to mean to bring forward a meeting or appointment. The last one is intonation and rhythm. Indian English has a distinct intonation and rhythm which can sometimes make it difficult for non-native speakers to understand. There is often a tendency to emphasize certain words or syllables in a sentence. So overall, Indian English is a rich and diverse variety of English language reflecting the unique history and culture of India.
The upcoming coverage of this video gives a brief explanation about what is phonology. There is a connection between phonology and phonetics, and let us handle about what is phonology in deep. The study of pronunciation consists of two fields. One is phonetics and phonology. And what is phonology? Phonology is how speech sounds are organized and affects one another in pronunciation. It deals with the system and patterns of sounds which exist within a particular language. The study of phonology of English looks at the vowels, consonants, and separate segmental features of a language. For example, stress, intonations, etc. When we talk about vowels and consonants within the discipline of phonology, we are referring to the different sounds we make when speaking and not the vowel and consonant letters we refer to when talking about spelling. What is phoneme? In any language, we can identify a small number of irregularly used sounds, for example, vowels and consonants that we call phonemes. A phoneme is the smallest conservative unit in the sound system of a language. For example, we can take it as a pen or a pen, like pet and bet. When we speak, we produce a continuous stream of sounds. In studying speech, we divide the streams into small pieces that we can call segments. For example, man, n, man. And it's not always easy to decide on number of segments. For example, mine, in, mine. The next is letters and sounds. It is very important to learn to think of English pronunciation in terms of phonemes rather than letter of the alphabet. Consider written English. For example, enough, through, thorough, thought, talk, think, those, thistle, tongue. church, chemistry, lodge, and cheerful. And there are some of special symbols or used to represent speech sounds which are tabulated for the reference. Again, what is the difference between phonetics and phonology? Phonology deals with the sound system of language, obviously, and phonetics deals with the physical realization of the elements of sound system. For example, how the sounds is physically produced, articulatory phonetics, or acoustic characteristics of a speech sounds, for example, acoustic phonetics. The next is segmental and separate segmental elements. Phonemes are the different sounds for the language. Although there are slight difference in how individuals articulate sounds, we can still describe reasonably accurately how each sound is produced. To sum up, phonemes are units of sounds which can be analyzed, and they are also known as segments. Suprasegmental features are features of speech which generally applies to the group of segments or phonemes. The features which are important in English are stress, intonations, and how sounds change in connected speeches. And there is different types of phonemes like consonants and vowels that we talked before. Consonants are divided into two things, that is voice and unvoiced, and consequently vowels are divided as single vowels and diphthongs, which is further divided as short and long. And suprasegmental features are divided as two things. One is intonations and stress, and which is further divided as word stress and sentence stress. Which is the end of the video. We can clearly and briefly understand what is phonemes and what is phonology comprises of.
Morphology in Indian English. To begin with, I would like to give a brief introduction about what morphology is. So, morphology is the study of how parts of words called morphemes create different meanings by combining with each other or standing alone. For example, if you take the morpheme chair and add the suffix yes, you create a new word chairs, a plural form with a slightly different meaning than the singular form. So morphology is a crucial part of lexicology, the study of words and their meanings, as well as etymology, the study of how words originate and evolve. Indian English literature, also known as the Indo-Anglican literature, as we all know, is a rich and diverse body of literary works written in English by Indian authors. The morphology in Indian English literature refers to the study of the structure and form of words, including their inflection, derivation, and syntax, used in the context of Indian English writing. And morphology plays a significant role in Indian English literature as it helps shape the linguistic expression and the style of writing. Moving on to the aspects of morphology in Indian English. So the first aspect is code switching. Indian English literature often incorporates code switching, which is the practice of switching between English and other Indian languages within a single piece of writing or a text. So this code switching can manifest in the morphology of the text, with Indian English authors blending English words and Indian language words to create unique and culturally rich expressions. For example, a sentence like I told you to buy the tickets for the movie Na, where Na, N-A, is a common discourse particle used in Indian languages for emphasis or agreement. The second aspect is hybrid words. Indian English literature often employs hybrid words which are formed by combining elements from English and Indian languages. So these hybrid words may have unique morphological structures, combining English prefixes, suffixes, or roots with Indian language words, creating a distinctive linguistic flavor in the writing. Moving on to the third aspect of morphology in Indian English, that is vernacular influences. Indian English literature often draws on the vernacular languages of India, such as Tamil, Hindi, Bengali, and other Indian languages for morphological inspiration. This can include incorporating local idioms, phrases, and other grammatical structures, which results in a distinct morphological flavor in the writing that reflects the Indian culture and linguistic context. The next aspect is borrowings and adaptations. Indian English literature may incorporate borrowings and adaptations from other languages, including regional Indian languages as well as foreign languages, that is, the loan words. So, these borrowed words and phrases may undergo morphological changes to fit the phonetic and grammatical patterns of Indian English, resulting in unique morphological forms in the literature. For example, words such as bazaar, which means marketplace in English, and pajamas, which again means loose trousers, and jungle, which is forest. These words are commonly used in Indian English literature. This reflects the influence of the Hindi and other Indian languages. The next aspect is standard English morphological rules. So, Indian English follows the standard English morphological rules, including inflection, that is, adding yes to form plurals. I have stated an example for this in the beginning while I was giving the definition of morphology. And another type of inflection, apart from adding yes, is ing, adding ing at the end of a word to form present participles. Another morphological rule is derivation, which means adding prefixes or suffixes to create new words. And the other rule is morphological rule is syntax, which deals with word order and the sentence structure. However, these rules may be adapted or modified to suit the Indian English context, which might result in distinct morphological patterns in the writing. Moving on to the next slide, creative new terms and usages. Indian English uses compound formation extensively. The compounds cousin brother and cousin sister allow the Indian English speaker to designate whether their cousin is male or female, a function which is inherent in the terminology of most Indian languages. And other compound words include chalk piece, key bunch, meeting notice, age part, and pin drop silence. Indians are also known for pluralizing and not pluralizing words. So they pluralize many English nouns and end up with words such as litters, furnitures, and woods. So these are all mass nouns that Indians tend to pluralize, and sometimes words that should not be pluralized are also sometimes pluralized by the Indians. For example, one of my relative, so it should be one of my relatives, but Indians tend to pluralize words that shouldn't be pluralized. Moving on to the shortened words. So Indians also have a tendency to shorten words. So they shorten many words to create commonly used terms. One such example is enthusiasm, and Indians call it enthu most of the times, and it can be used in many ways. For example, one can say, that guy has a lot of enthu. While this simply is an abbreviation, enthu can also be used as an adjective where enthusiasm cannot, as in, he's a real enthu guy. So the same applies for fundamentals, which is shortened as fundas, fundas. An example for this is she knows her fundas, so which means she knows her fundamentals. And what is interesting about fundas is that when the ending as is removed or dropped and u is added, it takes on a new meaning and can be used in a new way. For example, Fundu basically means wonderful or brilliant, and one can say that he is a Fundu person, or even he is Fundu, which actually means that he is brilliant. Another aspect of morphology in Indian English literature is the use of honorifics and politeness markers. So they are significant and an important part of Indian culture. So Indian English literature may incorporate morphological markers of politeness, such as the use of G or Sir as honorifics to convey respect or formality. For example, yes sir or no G are commonly used expressions in Indian English literature. So generally, morphology in Indian English literature is a dynamic and evolving aspect of the language, influenced by the linguistic diversity of India and the use of loan words, unique verb usage, honorifics, politeness markers, and code switching. So these morphological features add depth and richness to Indian English literature, making it distinct and reflective of the cultural and linguistic nuances of India.
Hello everyone, I'm Josephine and I'll be explaining about Indian English Lexicon. So, Indian English Lexicon has many distinct vocabularies which is taken from old and new morphological structures. So, in Indian English Lexicon, we can find new acronyms and abbreviations. These acronyms and abbreviations were taken from Indian languages, and there are certain words were created to replace English words. And these acronyms and abbreviations are culture specific and even more specifically used by certain age group. For example, MCP, an acronym stands for Male Chauvinistic Pig, and FOC, which means free of charge. Much to the contrary, there are some common acronyms which are not culture specific and used by every Indian English speakers. For example, JAN stands for January, PRINCI for Principal, GenSec for General Secretary. Next, we are moving into pronunciation differences between Indian English and British American English. So, in Indian English, there is an vowel addition while pronouncing certain words. For example, typically is pronounced as typically in Indian English. That extra R sound is added in this word, whereas a British and American English speaker would pronounce it as typically. Seema Jain, the author of the book Indian English Literature, states that one of the characteristics of Indian English is the pronunciation of acronyms. So, Indian English speakers pronounce the acronyms just the way they are spelled after being shortened. But the North American English speakers usually read the abbreviations as the full word. For example, SEC is pronounced as secretary by a North American English speaker, but an Indian English speaker would pronounce it as SEC. Next, we are moving on to the topic Indian English grammar peculiarities. So, in Indian English, you can find an Indian English speaker addresses an elder person with a suffix G, like for an example, Uncle G, and it differs from regional languages, especially in Tamil. The suffix la or a is added very often. Few examples of Indian English words and phrases. So instead of saying please do what is necessary, an Indian English speaker would prefer kindly do the needful phrase. And instead of writing move to an early time, the Indian English speaker would use prepon, and out of town was replaced as out of station phrase. Moving on to exploring the unique vocabulary and usage of Indian English. A famous Indian author and man of new words, Shashi Tharoor, states that brinjal is found nowhere in British English and it was exclusively created by Indian English speakers. So, brinjal is a word used to describe a unique vegetable called eggplant. Instead of using eggplant, Indian English speakers call it as brinjal. To conclude, in this presentation, we have seen how the Indian English lexicon has many layers, especially the contribution of acronyms and abbreviations in Indian English lexicon, followed by the differences in pronunciation and spelling between Indian English and North American and British English. Especially, we also explored certain unique Indian English words and their connotations. And thank you.
So the conclusion part of the characteristic of Indian English is there is maybe variety of English language, but the Indians claim that is very similar to British English. By the opinion is based on surface level examination of the lexical similarities. Likewise, when Indian English speakers have a great deal of regional and educational differential existence. So they can operate with many factors like phonological, morphological, lexical and syntactic levels, which will be characterized with items brought up in the recorded sessions in the above slides. The morphology speaks about the creativity and the new terms and usages. Likewise, it is said with chalk piece, key bunch or meeting notice, and they have lot of short terms like enthusiasm with enthu, and fundu is one of only called wonderful or beautiful. So, likewise, in Hindi word muska to muskify means to flatter someone or butter them up. So these words are with that. Then they also have suffixes such as dome, coolie dome, and goddessism. In Indian English, pre is substituted to post in postpone to create postpone, which indicates, for example, a meeting that has been moved for